Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I should mention, Emma, I started retweeting some of your great reporting and how we met. And you've been in Washington, D.C., you've been covering this all day. And so I have a lot of really smart, very engaged Instagram followers, and I try to provide them with as much information as I can. So let's start at the very beginning, as they say. We should let everyone know, by the way, that the Democrats did win the state of Georgia. That now the Senate will be in the hands of democratically controlled Senate at the beginning of Joe Biden's administration. So let's talk about today, because I don't think anybody has ever seen anything like it. It's so heartbreaking and infuriating, I would say, because it seems to me that the president of the United States is inciting violence. Not only is he not recognizing our democracy, but now he is inciting violence and trying to encourage his followers to be violent. So start at the beginning of the day, Emma. Just take us through it, because I know you've been covering all along.
Yeah, I think that the way you put it is perfect, where it is so unprecedented. Before you called, I was trying to put together a list of everything that happened, and it was just hard to, really hard to report in real time because of that. Um, from the very start, it was kind of a tinderbox for things to happen. Everybody knew that there was going to be some activity. Like you said, the night before, or rather the day before, there was the Georgia elections, and the Democrats ended up winning both of them. We knew last night that Raphael Warnock had won his race, but Ossoff and Perdue, we didn't really know until this afternoon. It was really close. And then going into today, you heard Joe Biden say in the weeks before, he said, really this shouldn't be a big deal. This is
Right.
the
Listen,
Electoral College.
Emma, I've been covering politics for decades now, and this whole certification of the presidential election is kind of a blip on the radar screen.
It should be a really boring day. That's kind of what, historically. So I think that's important to note. But then going in, it started by Senator Josh Hawley was the first person to say that he was going to object to the certification, which, like we just said, really isn't something that happens all that much. Ted Cruz and
Something, I guess, in 2016, Maxine Waters did something that was basically prompted some debate. But anyway, we don't have to
yeah,
get into
um,
it. After
and
all was said and done, how many Republicans were objecting?
yeah, so we had over 100 members of Congress and 13 senators, I believe, led by Hawley and Ted Cruz were really the two people who were spearheading it. So Trump, before this, there was a big rally outside with his supporters, and he gave a speech this morning from the Ellipse, so the south lawn of the White House. And in it, he encouraged Mike Pence to, quote, do the right thing. He was really encouraging Pence to um, go along with it. And go along with the objections. Whether or not that's legal is pretty dubious. Most people say it's not. Um, but so we kind of had all of this happening. So then you had all of these thousands of supporters go to the Capitol building. Um, the Trump speech was about an hour before the certification was set to begin. First two states, Alabama and Alaska, they voted for Trump. Went fine. And then when we got to Arizona is when the objections started. And then around 2:20, protesters actually breached the Capitol building. And from there, it just kind of got chaotic. The House and Senate had to be evacuated. My colleagues who were there heard gunshots. We're seeing reports that at least one person was taken to the hospital critically wounded. Five others were taken to the hospital through the ambulance, and 15 others were injured. But that's what we know right now. I think that it's safe to say more could happen. Um, and while all this was happening, Trump was at the White House. He waited a while to necessarily make any comments. And then when he did, he tweeted out calling for peace. And even then, you heard a lot of Republicans and Democrats, people on both sides saying, we really want the president to speak up and condemn this. President-elect Joe Biden, he gave a speech and he called on President Trump, and he said, you need to step up. You need to talk. You need to tell people to cut it out. And then Trump did eventually release a video on his Twitter account. In it, though, he still said that the election was stolen. He told the protesters, I love you. And but he did tell them to go home and cut it out.
Yeah, and so this is Emma Kinery, everybody. She's the national political reporter for Bloomberg News, and Emma's been covering this story all day, talking to her colleagues who are up on the Capitol. So they breached the Capitol. Then the building was evacuated. Did a lot of the members of Congress go into their offices, or did they leave the building?
So that was the big thing, is that there was kind of conflicting messages. For the most part, what ended up happening was everyone was evacuated into their offices. In some, I believe some senators were taken to kind of an undisclosed area. They weren't necessarily saying where they were being held, but not exiting the Capitol, because I think that was one thing. There were reports, some people saying, like, we need buildings around the Capitol to be evacuated, but other, the police and others were saying, well, we don't want to, we don't want people out there with the protesters. We don't want to cause more chaos. So they end up holding, and that's kind of where we're at right now. Last time I checked,
I'm sorry, they're holed up in their offices right now, Emma. And there's a curfew, by the way, that has been put into place. Were some of these people arrested? It's interesting. People are saying, don't call them protesters, call them terrorists. But were these people arrested?
There were some arrests. I don't have that data right in front of me right now, but I think that there were arrests, but there's still a decent amount of people out there. And like you said, the curfew goes into place in 19 minutes, but we'll see if anyone abides by it.
It's interesting, Emma, because we've been hearing for days now, and I've been seeing on social media, storm the Capitol, and all these protesters were descending upon the nation's capital. And it doesn't seem as if law enforcement was really prepared for this.
Yeah.
It also seems like the DOD was very slow to call in the National Guard. I guess they have called in. I've been doing a bunch of other things. I haven't been following every single step, but were people, was the Capitol Hill police taken by surprise? Didn't they suspect that there might be trouble? And from your vantage point, were they not prepared?
I think that's a big question right now. And so, when breaking news happens, we're trying to figure out what happened. And now we're kind of at the point where we're asking those questions. Like you said, everyone knew that this huge rally was going to happen. Everyone knew that, I believe yesterday or perhaps the day before, Trump had said that he was going to give a speech right before. We knew for the past week that Hawley and other Republicans were planning on objecting and kind of calling the election into question. So I think that there had been all of these signs, and the fact that they were able to get through to the Capitol building is a big question right now. Like, how did that happen? And like you said, there was, I believe it was Mayor Bowser, maybe incorrect on that, had called in, requested the National Guard help. Originally, there were reports that they had said no, and then they were eventually called in. So it was still kind of like this confusion over what exactly to do.
Well, it sounds like, excuse my French, shit show that's going on there, and incited by the president himself by repeating, these specious claims about the election that have been denied in court after court after court by state after state after state. And so we're going to be talking to Neil Katyal, my friend, who former Justice Department lawyer and who's kind of an expert on these issues at About 6. But can you tell me what some of your colleagues were saying to you? Because they were actually in the Capitol, around the Capitol. Where did the president give his speech? Was he speaking from where exactly was he when he spoke?
He was speaking from the ellipse, so right behind, he was on a stage right behind the White House. So the White House was in the background. And so that's where he was speaking. I think when all of this kind of went down, there was a lot of confusion. Like I said, there was a point when we were receiving emails from my colleagues who were in the House offices and the House press chambers that lawmakers were getting out gas masks. So first everyone was getting gas masks, then they're being evacuated, then they heard gunshots. So it was really chaotic when things started happening. Because of course, people in the chambers didn't necessarily know what was going on outside out there. So I think that was kind of the big thing. And now we're looking at it. And like you said, the thing is what happens next, where President Trump gave this speech from the White House. He put out that video calling on the protesters to stop. There have been reports online that the protesters intend to continue to protest even after the curfew is called into place, and perhaps amp it up. So we'll see, and we'll kind of see how the president responds to this moment.
Yeah. Somebody's messaging me that there were a lot of people in the building who weren't members of Congress, I guess, or as well. So
yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of staffers, and I know people on the Hill. I have sources there who work in Congress, and they were confused what to do too, and where to go. And they were receiving all of these emails, trying to figure out what to do.
Well, it is absolutely insanity. And obviously, the people are still inside the Capitol. I heard that Mitt Romney was fit to be tied, was very upset about this, that some of the protesters, or whatever you want to call them, basically went into offices. They were defacing statues inside the Capitol. And how many people were able to breach the security at the Capitol? Do you know how many people got inside?
I don't know the exact number, but there was a lot of people. You saw the videos of people were walking through the rotunda, and just filling it. The statue, the Hall of Statues was full of people. And like you said, I saw a tweet where someone was in Nancy Pelosi's office and able to access many areas, which in theory, this should be one of the most secure buildings.
Well,
This shouldn't happen.
Some of the people on comments were saying, how were they able to get through security? That is just, and again, as you knew, people were stealing podiums, stationery. It just seems so crazy to me that they were able to just storm the Capitol building. And it is, I think one of the big questions is, why wasn't Capitol Police and why weren't federal authorities notified? Because this is obviously, as you said, people knew that these people were gathering in the nation's capital.
Yeah. I think, like you said, that's the big question, especially after this, is what took the National Guard so long, and how will they respond tonight as they, continue, as it continues to go down.
My team just is writing me, this invasion was the first time the U.S. Capitol has been breached since the British attacked and burned the building in 1814 during the War of 1812.
Yeah.
Any chance that this is going to be unfolding, but people are asking about the 25th Amendment. A lot of people are asking if these have been Black Lives Matter protesters, how they would have been treated by Capitol Police. I think there are going to be many, many questions about this in the days and weeks ahead. My friend Charlie just said it's just beyond. But as you said, Emma, it really was a powder keg. You had this certification process going on, people objecting to a free and fair election. You have what happened in Georgia with both Warnock and Ossoff, winning. And then you had all these people, angry people, some from white supremacist organizations descending on the nation's capital. So it's not surprising that, as I said, this was a recipe for real disaster.
Yeah, and I mean the day before, yesterday, the day before this happened, they had arrested the leader of the Proud Boys movement in DC for defacing a Black Lives Matter sign at a historically Black church. He was let go, but he was told that he cannot come back to DC for a period. And exactly, like you said, I think that that is also one of the things that makes this story so interesting going forward is how much it has to do with the moment that we're in. How would they have reacted faster if the protesters were not supporters of the president? Would they have reacted differently? I think that these are all kind of the big questions that we have.
Someone mentioned, according to MSNBC, that the woman who was shot has died. I don't. Do you know? Do you have any details on that person? I have not independently confirmed that, everyone. But do you have it?
No, I do not. So I have not confirmed that as well. Um, that is sad to hear. I hadn't heard that she had passed until now. Um, but that was the only person who I have heard reported who was critically injured. There are, I believe, 5 other people in the hospital right now because of it. But also, we'll see. I know that one officer was injured. And yeah, but that doesn't appear to be life threatening.
This Pete Williams, my old colleague at NBC, is reporting that the woman who was shot inside the Capitol building has died. And then also, I'm hearing from my team that Mitch McConnell is telling members they should go back into the chamber tonight in order to project strength. So if that is the case, they will continue with the certification process.
Yeah, and like I had said earlier, I did not have information on the Senate side, but I do know that that's what the House was talking about doing. It was all a matter of when it was safe to do this. So, if Mitch McConnell's saying that, and we're also hearing it from Hakeem Jeffries, who leads the House Democratic Caucus, then definitely we should expect to see them go back.
All right. Well, an unprecedented day to say the least. Emma, thanks for the update. If you get more information and you can communicate with our team so I can let people know, I'll be talking to Neil Katyal, everyone, at
Definitely.
6, find out what what are the possibilities in terms of the president's complicity in this kind of insurrection, I guess. Treason, whatever you want to call it. But I'll give you guys updates as we get them. Emma, thanks again. Again, if you have something interesting that you'd like us to share, please just stay in touch. And thank you so much for your great work today.
Thank you so much, Kitty. I really appreciate it. And thank you all. I'll make sure to let you know as things
Okay.
break.
If you guys like what you see, subscribe right here.